Hi, everyone. Florida House Democratic Leader Fentress Driskell here. I hope that you are doing well. I hope that your week is off to a great start. It's so funny. I ran into a friend who's a fellow legislator today, and it was my first time seeing her this week. And we were just catching up, and she's like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Man, I haven't seen you all week. It's been such a long week." And she's like, "It's Tuesday." I'm like, bruh, it's like literally day 2 or day 3, depending on how you count it. And but day 2 of the work week. But let me tell you, it's just been busy. Back in Tallahassee, we are in, I think this makes the 7th week of legislative session, which means we have 2.5 weeks to go. That also means that things are starting to move a lot faster. We're on the floor twice this week hearing bills and passing them, or, maybe not passing some of them, but, we'll hear a lot of bills on the floor tomorrow and on Thursday. And so we're here to bring you our weekly live stream. I have a very special guest for you tonight. I'm going to let her get settled in, and I'll bring her to the stage here in a few moments. But she's pretty phenomenal, so that's going to be a special treat for you and for me. So a couple things that have been on my mind this week with legislative session. We had an appropriations committee meeting today, and appropriations is the committee that allocates the money and looks out for the fiscal policy of the state, et cetera. And I would love to get your takes on this. I'll be happy to tell you mine. So property insurance rates are rising in this state. We know that affordability is a big issue. It's very difficult for people to find an affordable place to live, and property insurance rates are through the roof. So it's kind of like, what is the state going to do about that? What has happened so far, we've had within the past couple of years, 2 special sessions and 2 legislative sessions to address the issue of property insurance. The Republican majority decided to give a $3 billion bailout to the property insurance industry. It has done nothing to bring our rates down. They decided to make it more difficult for you and me to sue our property insurers if we ever need to hold them accountable. Like, for example, they're not holding up their end of the bargain whenever we have a claim, like after a storm or whatever. So those are the policy choices that they've made. But now they've made a third one. Let me tell you about this. So today, in this tax package, it included a number of things. It gives a lot of tax cuts to big corporations. It does not give enough tax relief to everyday Floridians like you and me. And most of the tax relief that we get comes through sales tax reductions or holidays because, we don't have a state income tax in Florida. So it's like when you go and buy kids their things that they need and their supplies and their clothes for back to school, oftentimes there's a tax holiday. And I know that parents and families really count on that. They really need that tax relief, and it's a good thing. So we have like shorter periods of tax relief for Floridians, but all these tax breaks for corporations who don't really need it. And then here's the kicker. They include a 1.75% discount, a less than 2% discount for homeowners on their property insurance rates. However, the companies that are giving those discounts then basically get to use it as a pass-through, and they get a tax break for it. So whereas this discount might save you or me, like, I don't know, $20, $50 in the course of a year off of a multi-$1,000 property insurance premium, the industry will get a $350 million tax break, $350 million or more. And I'm just telling you, they already got a $3 billion bailout once before. So it seems to me that the scales have been tilted in favor of the powerful and not for the people. And I have a serious problem with that. So I was one of the members on the committee who voted no today. And I hope that the tax package improves before it comes to the floor. But that's just one example of how things are just so out of balance in Florida. The other thing that's been going on, we have had a number of advocacy days at the Capitol, and I love it. I love it when the groups come from back home or from all over the state to come and talk about the issues that are important to them. So this week was the Links Days at the Capitol for the Links Incorporated. Today it's Kappa Alpha Psi Day at the Capitol, so it was good to see those brothers. But it also is the days at the Capitol for my beloved sorority, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. So it was very great to see my sorors in the house and to spend some time with them, educate them on the issues, and get them pumped up and excited to go and meet with different members in the House and the Senate and advocate for priorities for the people. Okay, now I promised you a very special guest. I promised you a very special guest. I don't want to hold out any longer because I try not to keep you too long on these live streams. Our special guest tonight is Karla Hernandez Motz. So Karla is the president of the United Teachers of Dade, which is the largest teachers union in the southeastern United States and one of the largest teachers union in the entire country. She served her first term as president from 2016 to 2019 and was elected for a second term by 73%. Boom. Prior to becoming president, she also served in other roles, including secretary and treasurer. In 2018, she led the charge to mobilize teachers and the Miami-Dade community, helping to pass Referendum 362, an initiative put forth by the Teachers Union of Dade to give public school teachers a salary raise and to improve security in schools. To date, this is the largest pay increase in the history of Miami-Dade County Public Schools, garnering support from more than 70% of Miami-Dade voters. What I love about this is whereas the state has failed to act and has failed to pay our teachers what they're worth, Karla was able to get this done as a local leader. So her goal is to have a profound impact on economic policy. She wants to ensure a good future for all students attending Miami-Dade public schools. But her policy chops and the initiatives that she leads and the impact that she has far extends beyond Miami-Dade. In fact, in 2022, she was the Democratic nominee for Lieutenant Governor of the state of Florida. That is how we met. I'm so honored to call her a friend. She has the passion, she has the purpose, she leads the people. She is a powerful woman. I can't wait to bring her to the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, let me get this right. Please welcome to the stage Miss Karla Hernandez Matz. How do I do it?
Thank you so much, Leader Driskell. It is a pleasure to be here with you. I love what you're doing, educating the community, talking about real issues, and just fighting the good fight. You're an amazing leader. You're doing the work, and you're obviously sharing it with people. And the people need to know, and people want to know. So I'm so grateful that you asked me to be on this show with you today. And let's talk. Let's talk all things kids, public education, what's going on with workers' rights. So much to teach our community about because they need to be informed voters. That's how we create the change that we need. That's how we become those change makers. And of course, we get out to vote and we vote for people who care about our issues.
That's right. And thank you so much for coming on. And when I asked you to come on, like folks know, when I asked Karla, she didn't even hesitate. She's like, let's go, let's pick the date. And so I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Maybe let's just start with the Florida's teacher shortage. Like, let's start with what is happening in public education, because Florida right now ranks 48th in the average teacher salary in the nation. Meanwhile, we have the teacher shortage that is one of the worst in the country. Like, how do you reconcile those two things? Like, could you talk a little bit about what's happening with teachers and with teacher pay?
Absolutely. So, I like to tell people that this is actually a self inflicted wound. So, we've seen, after so many years of GOP Republican control, we've seen how the conditions of public education have actually deteriorated. We've seen how there's been defunding of public schools, how there's been channeling and just funneling of public tax dollars to private entities, to all these unaccountable organizations to our community that are just taking taxpayer dollars, of course, at the risk of our children, which public schools educate over 90% of kids, of them not having the resources that they need. And so this is a concerted effort, unfortunately. And so what we're seeing is that not only are they defunding, the GOP extremists are defunding public schools, they're also attacking workers. And when you hear so much rhetoric about banning books, banning AP African American studies, censoring teachers. I mean, Leader Driskell, we're truth tellers. I mean, teachers, this is what we do. We're passionate about educating. We want to make sure that our students know history, that they know, just content so that they are critical thinkers and know how to make wise decisions in their
Well,
future.
let's
And
talk
when
about this, right? Because, like, with the book bans, like, to me, it is so insulting to the kids. It's insulting to the parents who think they're sending their kid to school to get a good, fair, balanced, education. But I think what I also hear you saying is that it's so unfair to the teachers who are just trying to do their jobs, right?
Absolutely. And what a lot of people, everybody knows a teacher. You either have a teacher as a neighbor, you go to church with a teacher, or somebody in your family is a teacher. So everybody knows the struggles of educators and teachers for so long, besides, being poorly paid in the state, because like you said earlier, the funding levels that, go to public education are abysmal in this state. We're 48th in the country. Teachers put a lot of their own pocket money, their pocketbook money into the work that they do. And so what do teachers do? You'll see them over the summer collecting materials, buying books in garage sales, in used book sales, in bookstores. But we create our own libraries so that children have a print rich environment where they can feel comfortable in their classrooms, take a book out, because we know that sometimes parents can't even take their kids to the libraries to give
Right.
them these books. And so teachers do all this. They go above and beyond. They put money into the profession. And now they're being told that you can't even have classroom libraries in the classroom. This is disheartening because obviously educators don't go into teaching because of the politics. They want to keep all of this politicization outside of the classroom. And
Right.
we have a governor who is just trying to politicize classrooms, politicize, our teachers, and of course it's harming kids. So what happens? You say all these bad things about educators. You have poor pay. You're talking about removing workers' rights. Unions are being attacked.
Ooh,
Contract
let's
wages.
let's get into that. Let's get into that. Let me set that up a little bit. So, because for people who don't know, last year, and actually they've been trying to nibble at this year after year after year. In fact, my mom was an educator in public schools for over 35 years, and I grew up in a union household and learned about how the state was led by folks, most of whom have never been teachers, never been in a classroom, but somehow seem to think they know best. And they were always eroding the rights of our teachers. And so now we have this bill that passed last year, and DeSantis signed it into law, that basically made it such that if unions don't keep their membership at a certain level, the union gets decertified. Can you talk about that a little bit more and what that has meant for United Teachers of Dade?
Absolutely. So we know that Governor DeSantis has been working in conjunction with the Freedom Foundation. It's an out of state extremist right wing think tank that's funded by Betsy DeVos, who has been the worst, Secretary of Education in our nation's history. The Koch brothers, all these people who don't care, number one, about workers' rights and have really been trying for a very long time to privatize public education. And
Mhm.
so they're funding the Freedom Foundation. The Freedom Foundation, by their own accord, they claimed that they wrote Senate Bill 256 and that they lobbied to pass it. And we have footage of them showing up to committee meetings and being the only people to speak in favor when you had hundreds of union workers from across all trades, not just teachers, but public sector union workers that were coming and speaking against it. And of course, the GOP lawmakers did not listen to working people, to the middle class folks. They passed this egregious law. It is the most egregious law ever, you know, not only written but passed and signed into law in the country. It was worse than everything that happened in Wisconsin, and everybody talked about what happened in Wisconsin. So not only did they limit how people can pay their union dues, so now we have a state government that's restricting grown folks, employees, and telling them what you can and cannot use your hard earned money for. But it's also creating these arbitrary numbers where they're saying that if in a work with no right state, and I say that intentionally in that form, in a work with no right state, if the union does not have 60% membership, which by the way, most lawmakers, especially GOP lawmakers, are not voted into their seats by 60% or anything close to that in terms of the
Mhm.
entire voting block. They're saying that unions have to be at a higher level, and that 60 at minimum 60% of all people that they represent must be union paying dues paying members, but they took away our ability to collect dues. So obviously it's very intentional. They're just trying to take away the rights of workers, trying to eliminate the voice of working people. Teachers have been advocating for, funds and resources for students. they've been fighting back against egregious laws that don't make sense. We're tired of the over testing. What happened 2 years ago? They created more tests instead of decreased tests, yet they
Are you
put it,
talking about are you talking about
they wrapped it in a gift that said we're eliminating tests, and they actually increased tests. I mean, it's mind
wait,
blowing.
are you talking about progress monitoring? I want to make sure.
Yes,
Tracking.
yes,
Okay, because
yes.
that was wild to me too. So a lot of folks grew up in Florida in the era of like the Jeb Bush, like high stakes testing, and teachers had to teach to the test, teach to the
Yes,
test. And so what Karla's talking about is 2 years ago, the legislature moved to this progress monitoring. But I think what it's resulted in, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I think what it's resulted in is like a lot of mini tests. Like
yes.
kids are having mini tests all the time, right?
Absolutely. So it's more
Yeah.
testing instead of less testing. It takes more time from teachers of doing, actual instructional time in the classroom. It's creating obviously more stress for students because the more tests that they have to take, the more pressure they feel. And, obviously this isn't good for our students and public education. So all these things are happening in the backdrop, right? You have workers' rights being eliminated, book bans censoring teachers, and so it's a self inflicted wound because now, guess what? The state of Florida has over 9,000 vacancies. I mean, think about that, 9,000 classrooms statewide where there is not a certified teacher teaching our babies, teaching our kids. We know how important missing one day of school is. We know how important a year in a child's life is developmentally, how much they can acquire, how much they need to learn to take them to the next level. And because of all these egregious anti education, anti worker bills that are being passed, people just don't want to be in this noble profession anymore. They're saying, we're passionate, we love our kids. It's not about the babies, it's not about our students, it's about the politics that are happening and what's being embedded into our schools. And so
So
people are leaving, and it's a shame because I love this profession.
let's talk about that too, right? Because, and I love that word, I love that phrasing, politrics. So, a lot of what we talk about here on this live stream, like we want to hear people's stories. We want to understand how these bad policies are impacting them, or maybe there are good policies that are helping them. So far, I haven't heard any about those yet, but
Not yet.
I know they're out there. But I'm a big believer that if we can share our stories, we will learn that it doesn't matter if we live in the Panhandle or the Keys. Oftentimes, it doesn't frankly matter if we're Republican or Democrat. These policies impact us all the same. And I think we can all agree that every Floridian deserves a freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. And that certainly must include the right for our kids to get a good education. But that starts with having great teachers, which means we have to pay people what they're worth. I wonder if you would agree with me, Karla. Like, I feel like what's happened is the majority, they continue to overreach so far and they're pushing people to their limits and to their edge. And I feel like actually that will create an opportunity for those who are on the center left, not just Democrats, but those who believe that they believe in workers' rights. They believe that people should have the right to, to go and work and earn a living and have just basic rights and basic freedoms and be able to, have collective bargaining and to advocate for themselves. I feel like this actually creates an opportunity for us to center the conversation on Florida's workers, to center the conversation on the American worker and let them know who's fighting for them. I mean, what do you think?
100%. I mean, I know that politics is always, very very tough for, conversations because you never know where people's ideology is and what their background is. But I'll tell you, as a person that lives in South Florida, people are very concerned over what they're seeing because these are all characteristics of fascism. And that's why I wore this shirt today, ban the fascists, not the books.
Yeah.
Because because I mean, so many of my neighbors are from Cuba, the Dominican Republic, from Haiti, these three countries that had fascist dictators. And we see the resemblance in all these things. What did they do first? They attack education. So
Hmm.
they try to limit what the education that communities can get. They burn books, right? They censor teachers. They defund education systems so that people can stay in their bubbles, not know what's going on, and so that you can control people by limiting the education. And so a lot of my friends and colleagues, even in our public school system, that fled, their countries and came here, they have this mentality and they think, well, it could never happen here because, this is the land of milk and honey. This is the United States of America.
Hmm.
There's just certain things that are impossible to happen. And people are starting to open up their eyes and see what's happening here, that this is exactly how fascist dictators happen, including in Spain. The last century, this happened in Spain too, not just with Papa Doc Duvalier in Haiti, or with President Trujillo in the Dominican Republic. I mean, we've seen it in so many places where there's been just this copying of what dictators can look like. And we're teachers. And so we teach this history, and we want people not to repeat those same mistakes. So we want to make sure that people understand what's going on, that this is a self inflicted wound, that this is intentional, that this is. Trying to not only undermine public education, but it's trying to destroy public education so that certain communities stay in their place, and don't have any upward movement, so that the certain people can continue to be in power. And if you take away the rights of workers and unions, and you disempower the middle class working people, then you've essentially destroyed the middle class. And it's going to be a system of those that have a lot and those that have none. And so, we're fighting back. We're pushing back against all these things. Every hurdle that DeSantis has put against unions, we be back. We're calling for this election. We want it to happen right away. And of course, we are trying to tell people, hey, we've got to vote better. If you
Yeah.
don't like what's happening to your child, if you don't like the over testing, if you don't like how they're eliminating books of Black and brown people, I mean, this is impacting our community too. Celia Cruz, Roberto Clemente, these are Afro Latino people, in our
Well,
history.
so can I
And
just
those books are being eliminated.
I remember when I was in second grade reading a book on Roberto Clemente. I remember that to this day, and I'm years old, right? Like I'm about to have a birthday in a couple of weeks. And that book, he was an inspirational figure to me then. He still is now. And I just like the thought of kids not being able to just read about that. It breaks my heart. This is the other thing too, and I think this is part of what you're driving at. Like it makes our kids less competitive out in the world if we're not giving them the world-class education that they deserve. And in fact, the education that is guaranteed to them under the state's constitution. A lot of people don't know that our state's constitution in Florida, in our wisdom, we enshrined it in our constitution to say that we are to have a high quality uniform system of public schools, and basically that it's supposed to be funded. And yet every year the legislature chips away at that. Let me ask you, if you had a wish list, let's say of like 3 things that you would like to see the state do in public education. I know there's so much more that we could do, but what would you think? What would you say are those 3 things?
I would definitely say that we need to be funded appropriately. I mean, 48th in the country, we're second to last, right?
Yeah.
And we're doing so much with such a diverse population. We have, children in rural communities that are, children of farm workers, and then we have urban areas with very diverse backgrounds from children that come from all parts of the world. We need to properly fund, because every child, it doesn't matter what zip code, their race, their ethnicity, their gender, every child deserves access to a high quality public education. We
Mhm.
believe it. We believe that every child should have access so that they can break barriers, break cycles, and truly understand that the sky's the limit, that success is theirs. But we have to have those resources so that we can give proper education to our kids. So I would say number one, funding. There's so much funding into all these other projects that don't have the impact that education does. There's longitudinal studies of how important early childhood education is and how it breaks poverty cycles. And yet nobody's doing about anything about it in the state of Florida, because we have GOP lawmakers that are more interested in funneling money to private sectors where it is unaccountable, and taxpayer dollars are going to for-profit institutions. So that's a big thing. I would say forget the testing. I mean, to any parent that's out there, and I have 2 children, okay? I have a middle school age child and I have an elementary age child. Um, Big news for everybody, breaking news. The FSA, the Florida standards, none of it is a prerequisite to get into college.
Mhm.
Colleges don't even look at it. colleges don't even look at it. Okay, like they look at ACTs, they look at ACTs, SATs.
Yeah.
They look at how how well rounded the child is. Are they taking AP courses? Are they taking AP courses? That's exactly what Governor DeSantis is trying to take away. He's taking away AP courses.
Mm.
So think about all these things. So I would say that this over testing, this teaching to test, teachers are tired of, students are tired of it,
Mhm.
parents are tired of it, and then giving teachers back that voice.
Yeah.
Educators know these, we're the professionals, we went to school for this, we
Yeah.
know our kids, we know what they need, we know how to educate them, and they've created so much bureaucracy around everything that we're literally draining the joy from our children from being in classrooms, because we're teaching to a test as opposed to teaching them holistically, giving them project based learning, giving them capstone projects so that they can be out there and be those thinkers that we want them to be, so that they can, get into the schools and have those dream jobs and careers that they want. So those would be my three wishes.
Well, I love those wishes. And now I'm going to invite the audience to do something, but I want you and I to talk about it too, which is for everybody out there who's listening, if you had a favorite teacher, if you had a teacher that like really impacted your life in a positive way, would you just drop their name in the chat, just uplift them, and let's show some love to our teachers, whether they're still in the profession or whether they're retired. I think it's important that we shine a light on the good work that our teachers do, because I feel like the laws that get passed a lot of times just put them on their heels. It keeps them so villainized, right? Like I'm going to shout out my mom, Mrs. Driskell. I'm going to shout out my sister, Sharita Morris, who teaches she's an educator in the Polk County school system. And there were a number of teachers who impacted my life. Now I'm going to get in trouble if I start calling them by names, but Mrs. McDaniel, Coach Taylor, gosh, so many who impacted my life in a positive way and helped prepare me for what I wanted to do in life, which is to go to a great college. I was blessed to go to an Ivy League college, blessed to go to law school. And it was all because of the foundation that I got in the Polk County public school system. Who is that for you, Karla?
I had this amazing art teacher. His name was Mr. McKay. Actually, is, because he's alive and well. And what was most interesting for me, I'm not an artist, right? But I found so much peace in his classroom, and the way he made me think, and the way he just was so accepting to everybody in the classroom and made everyone feel welcome. I think that was just so great, so loving, so embracing. And he was funny, and he taught us all these art concepts, and he was just the coolest teacher ever. He invited me to his retirement a few years ago. He retired and then he came back. So he's back in the school system because he loves educating so much. And I think it's so amazing that that we see how much effort people put into this craft, into loving the community and giving back in these ways. And I just think that everybody, not only do they have a, a do they have a favorite teacher, but it is because somebody believed in them and said,
Mhm.
I see things in you that you have yet to see in yourself, that have
Yes.
really pushed us and propelled us to be just better people, and keep on pushing for things that we want.
I love that. I'm just going to uplift some in the chat. Mrs. Gorgilicus. I'm probably not saying that right, Cheryl Ann, but second grade, way, way back when. Peter uplifts Joyce Hall. Christopher Webb says, I'm old, but he'll always remember Mrs. Connolly. I love that. Jordy shouts out to Mr. Weimer, his AP US government teacher in high school, who got me to pre-register to vote. I will tell you too, I thought I was going to be an engineer until I took Coach Taylor's AP American Government and Economics class. And that completely changed my life. I went to Florida Girls State. I learned about politics at a young age, and I never looked back. Completely changed the trajectory of my life. I could be somewhere right now designing bridges, girl. I don't know, which is also super important. But in retrospect, that's not my ministry. This is. And so I'm so grateful that I had a teacher who saw that in me and pulled it out. Feel free, folks, to drop in the chat if you want to uplift any educators in your life, past or present, who've made an impact, because we want to show them some love. And I mean, speaking of the love, let me ask you this question. And I know we're running up on time, so we'll end here shortly. But there are a lot of folks out there for whom politics feels very heavy, and a lot of folks out there are losing hope. We had somebody drop in the chat earlier that the school boards are getting attacked and being politicized. It feels like everything's being politicized. And sometimes it just feels like the pathway towards victory, towards more equity, towards more balance is fraught with all types of hardships. And how do we get there? What would you say to somebody tonight who is looking for hope and believing that Florida and indeed our American democracy can turn around and that it can be saved?
So, number one, I'll let you know that being apathetic and losing hope is part of the sinister game that the other side is playing. They want you to do just that. So you can't let that happen. You got to push back and keep on moving forward in spite of everything that you hear, all around you. Are there culture wars? 100%. All of this is trying to divide communities. And we know that when there's division, that's when they can conquer. So we cannot allow that to happen. We have to be brighter than that. We have to be smarter. And we have to understand this, that if we are not sitting at the table, we're part of the menu. They're
Oh,
going to play this game with or without us. Okay. So we're part of the menu, means that, they're taking advantage of us, or we're sitting at the table and we're creating policy that's going to be beneficial for our communities. And so, to everybody that's out there, whether or not you have a child in our public schools, whether you have a child at all, if you are human, if you care about the well-being of others, if you want your community to prosper, then we have to invest in education. And that everything that is worthy of being loved, everything that is worthy of, just being fought for, that we have to fight for it. And we have to push, and we have to make sure that not only are we registering people to vote, that we're talking about these issues that are important, because people vote for issues. They especially teachers who don't want to feel politicized the way that we've been politicized as of recent, and anybody else. You talk about the issues, you talk about what's important, you talk about bread and butter issues, about wages, about benefits, about education, about making sure that every child has access to a high quality education, that children can come to school and eat and learn and grow and be successful. That's what people care about. And when we get back to those basics, and when we organize people by talking to them and being in community with folks, then we're going to go a long way. We're not that different, y'all. We're not that different. But we
that's
got to
right.
be able to talk to each other. And even when there's so much hate and negativity, we got to just keep on spreading the love.
I
Love is.
believe that. I believe that. So I don't see her in the chat tonight, but I also just want to uplift Miss Carolyn Baldwin, who was not my teacher, but she's an educator, and she was one of the area superintendents in Polk County when I was a senior in high school. And she did so much, Karla, to try to help me make it to college. And I will forever be grateful for her and her friendship. The thought just dawned on me as you were really trying to give our listeners some hope. What is your personal story? What led you to education? Like, what attracted you to that? How did you wind up an educator?
So, I'm a first generation American. My parents both came from Honduras. My dad was actually an accountant by trade, but when he came here, he was a farm worker. So he was cutting sugarcane and picking tomatoes and doing like really hard manual labor. Then he became a carpenter. Somebody picked him up and said, "Hey, well, we have so many jobs in the construction industry." So he taught me about labor. He taught me about fighting for people's rights, making sure that people are not treated as second class citizens, that everybody deserves wages, dignity, and respect at the workforce. But my grandmother, who helped raise me, she was illiterate. She was actually an indigenous woman from Honduras. And because of her indigeneity, she wasn't allowed to go to school. And so my grandmother could not help me do my homework. But what she did is that every afternoon when I came home from school, she had a little meal for me, a little snack. And she said, "Okay, you have your snack, you have your materials. I need you to study now." And she supported me and encouraged me and said, education is key, because she knew what had been robbed, what they had robbed her of, right? Her education. And she kept on saying, education is key. And because I learned sometime in middle school, I realized that my grandmother was illiterate. And I realized that there are little girls like my grandmother who are indigenous, who are brown girls, girls from, different parts of not just the country, but around the world, that are not afforded this opportunity. I started to really consider what it is that I wanted to do. And I was like, I love my grandmother. My grandmother is amazing already, but what more could she have done? if she were offered the opportunity that other kids, that everybody deserves. And
Mhm.
so I actually became a special education teacher, because I wanted to work even with more vulnerable kids, because I know that even though we live in the United States, we know that things are not equal, and we know that there are children that not only are vulnerable, that need additional resources and services, and many times because they can't express themselves, they are not given the opportunities that they deserve. And so I became a special ed teacher, but it is because of my grandmother, who was
Mm.
not afforded an education, that I decided that I wanted to become a teacher. And then my dad, who taught me about the labor movement and fighting for people who can't fight for themselves, that kind of brought everything together.
I really appreciate you sharing that, and I think that yeah, I think a lot of people will be able to resonate with that. I mean, it certainly resonates with me because as I look at some of the challenges that my own family faced, I would think about my grandparents, one of whom was a domestic, one of whom worked in the mills, another who worked in the phosphate mines, another who parked cars. He was a valet parking cars for white families in the segregated South when they would go shopping, and just the limited opportunities that they had, but not that they lacked the intelligence. They didn't
Right.
lack the intelligence, but it was the limitations in terms of what they could pursue and how far they could go with their educations before they had to fall back and work for their families. Which reminds me, and we didn't touch on this, but there's a child labor law that recently has been moving through the Florida legislature, which is weakening restrictions, and it makes me afraid that we're going to roll back to those times where we're putting kids in a position where they have to focus more on working rather than getting their educations. But I still appreciate you sharing your story because I have a feeling that it will resonate with folks as they think about their own histories and what led them to their own passion. And everybody, please remember, we want to hear your stories. We really do. We love them. We read them. You can always visit the website, venturesforflorida.com, and share your stories. You can find the little link there and share your story via the website. You can also send it in via email, your voice at venturesforflorida.com. We appreciate you. We read each and every one of them. These live streams, we've been doing them for just about a month, maybe a little over the month. And so we continue to play with the format. We try to bring you good information that you can use about what's happening in Tallahassee, and wonderful, magnificent guests like Karla. Karla, I just got to thank you so much. You made this episode so special tonight. Talking about public education is something that's so close to my heart and close to the hearts of so many. I know we will have you back because there is more that is happening in public education that we need people to be informed about. And you definitely know how to bring the inspiration and bring the heat and get people fired up, because we have an election coming up this November and we need to make sure that people are registered to vote. And here's your weekly reminder, folks. Check your voter registration status. You can do that so easily. Just go onto your supervisor of elections website or give them a call. Make sure that your status is updated. Make sure that you re-enroll and to vote by mail. You don't have to wait until the last minute as we get closer to the election season. We want to make sure that you have what you need to vote. Miss Karla, any last words?
I want you to know that on March 10th, which is a Sunday, we're going to have a big March for Education here in South Florida. So, to all the folks from South Florida that are watching this, March 10th, we're going to be in the Torch of Friendship in downtown Miami. We're expecting hundreds of people. There's going to be a big consortium of professors from all across the world that are concerned over what's happening in Florida. They're hearing about all this fascism that's popping up, about the banning of books. And so these scholars are also very concerned. And they're going to be here in South Florida supporting and uplifting the work of public education. We invite everybody. March 10th, starting at 1:30, we're going to march, we're going to rally, we're going to talk about all things that are important to our kids and to our community. And so you're always welcome to come, leader. Would love to see you in the place. And, for everybody who's out there, I'll say this uplifting thing for you, leader Driskell. We pray for you, for your continued strength, for your vision, so that you will continue to lead with purpose, so that you will continue to lead with dignity, because it's hard to be in the muck, but there are lotus flowers that bloom every day in that muck, and you are that lotus flower. So in spite of everything that's happening, keep pushing, keep fighting for people, because there are people that look like me and you, and people that don't look like me and you, who are counting on people like you to keep on fighting for them in their communities. So thank you so much for everything that you do.
Well, thank you for that. I receive it. I really do. I appreciate the encouragement because, girl, it's hard up here sometimes. I can be transparent about that. But it's good to have good friends who keep us uplifted and who remind us of why we are in this fight. I thank you. I appreciate you so much. Folks, you heard it March 10th. Make sure that you are following Karla online. You can follow her on her social media. I'm sure she'll be posting about that with more information as we lead up to March 10th. But it's important for communities to have spaces to gather and to advocate for what they believe in. So if you believe in public education like we do, hope that we get to see you on March 10th in Miami, protesting, gathering, rallying for the rights for public education. We appreciate it. Karla, thank you so much. Everybody, we'll go ahead and end our conversation here. And we thank you for tuning in and for sticking with us. We'll see you next week at 8 p.m. We always try to bring you these live streams on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. If there's anything actually that you want us to talk about or that you want to hear about, you can also drop that at the yourvoice@venturesforflorida.com email address, because we'd love to be as responsive as we can. But until next week, take care, everybody. Thanks so much.